We'll get started. I hope you're in the right place. This is a Designing Your Career workshop hosted by Pathstream, and we are going to talk tonight about how to answer the question, "Tell me about yourself." Okay, this is something that I promise you will get asked in every interview you're in, and so I want you to be really well prepared for this question. And just to introduce you, my name is Lauren. I am the VP of Learning Experience. I'm a co-founder of Pathstream. I'm a career coach. I do all sorts of different things, but I've been coaching students for over 10 years. So I'm really excited to kind of go through this question and go through this content with you today. So as I mentioned, our goal today is really, hi, Melissa. Nice to see you. Our goal today is really to make sure that you have a framework for answering the question confidently and effectively, this question of "tell me about yourself." And so a lot of times this question will come to you in different ways. Sometimes it will be, "Hey, Lauren, tell me about yourself. Tell me your story." Sometimes it can be, this is a question I asked today in an interview. "Can you walk me through your resume and just tell me, how did you get from where you started your career to where you are today?" Sometimes it can even look like, "Why are you interested in this job?" Right? Like, why do you want this job? And sometimes you want to start telling your story to really give people an understanding of who you are and what you're interested in. So this question can look a lot of different ways, but I promise you can answer it the same way every time. So before I go into a framework, I want to talk about why people are asking you this question. Okay. Why is it the first question you get asked? Why are you going to repeat this 100 times in any interview you do? Well, because it provides the interviewer with an overview of you, a very quick snapshot of your resume. Sometimes the people that are interviewing you haven't even looked at your resume in a lot of depth. So they just want to know, who is this person that they're talking to? It also puts you in the hot seat for the first 1 to 2 minutes of an interview to sell yourself and put yourself in the best possible light you can put yourself in, right? So it puts you kind of in that position where you get to kind of steer the conversation a little bit because you're going to tell your story how you want to tell it. And it also shows the interviewer a little bit about your personality, right? So it's a very quick way for somebody to assess your motivation, your enthusiasm, your preparation, right? How much work did you put into preparing the answer to this question? So when I ask this question of people, I immediately can tell from their 1-minute answer, did they prepare for this interview? Have they been preparing for interviews in general? And I get a sense of their personality a little bit, right? So this is an important question, but I don't want you to get intimidated because there's actually a really clear way of answering this. So this is just a quote from a former recruiter, Amanda, who's actually on our team at Pathstream. She said that the people that I'm most excited to place in jobs are the people that are most excited to talk to me, right? And this question is your first opportunity to be excited and to get in front of the person that might be giving you a job. So a couple of really awesome things about this question. I know I'm talking a lot about a single question, but I actually think this question is one of the most important parts of interviewing. You get to tell your story the way that you want to tell it, okay? And that's a really huge opportunity and a gift, and I'm going to explain how we do that. But you get to say, "Hey, you can see my resume, but let me tell you my story," right? Let me bring this to light for you. Your personality gets to come through, which we talked about. Also, when you tell a story, people connect to stories. And that's actually an evolutionary thing that we've become attuned to as human beings, is stories and storytelling. And so when you start with a story, you're making that connection with somebody that you don't even know. And as I said, there's a formula so you can prepare and take the pressure off of yourself. So I've got a really quick poll for you, and I'm going to launch this poll because I always like to have one poll in my webinars, and I want to know from you, what is the hardest part about answering this question? Okay, so I'm launching this poll. We'll get a couple. I'd like to get about 75% of response rates here, but I want to know, why is this hard for you? Maybe it's not hard for you, right? But I imagine you came here because there's a reason. So I want to know what is challenging about this question for you. Awesome. I'm going to give it another 10 seconds because I want to make sure I'm almost at 75%. Awesome. Okay. So let me show you what everybody wrote here. I can share these results with you. So we've definitely got a spread here, but I think the two top ones are that people in the audience here are not sure how to talk about their past experiences, and other people are how to know which past experiences to talk about and which ones to leave out. So this is great. We're going to talk about all of this tonight. All right. So what we're going to do today is we're going to look at some stories. And we're going to look at some good stories, some good tell me about yourself, and maybe some less good tell me about yourself. And then we're going to walk through a framework and then do Q&A at the end. So I want to start with an example because I think that's really important. So this is Jake, and he's being asked by his hiring manager, hey, tell me about yourself. And he says, so I graduated from college a few years ago, and I wasn't totally sure what I wanted to do. I got a sales job at a tech company, and I started learning the industry. Eventually, my team was reduced and I was laid off. I took off time to help my parents whose health was declining, and I started working some retail jobs while looking for something else. A friend of mine recently changed careers and became a data analyst, and she recommended I look into it, right? I did, and it was really interesting, and I ended up enrolling in a certificate. I just finished it, and I'm interested in data analysis work now. Your company looks great, and I'd love to be a part of it. So in the chat, I want to know, there's a couple problems here. What are some of the problems with this story? Tell me in the chat. What are we not loving about this? Yeah. So Ashley says there's like kind of low energy, right? There's just kind of like, yeah, I did this, and then I started doing this. It's a little bit vague. And David, I think what you're saying is true, is like, he's not really showing any kind of like leadership or like, I decided this, right? It's kind of like, well, this happened to me, then this happened to me, right? So it's very passive. Yeah, so Nuri, he talks about being laid off, which we're going to talk about how to talk about that, but he does mention that. Yes, he's not really talking too much about his experience at this company and what he learned, right? He doesn't really sound very passionate. Awesome. These are amazing responses. All right, let's try again. Let's have Jake try again. So after I graduated from college, I started my career as a sales development representative at a tech company. I taught myself about all the product I was selling, and I learned Salesforce and developed really deep relationships with large clients. I was actually in the top 10% of representatives the year that I started, and I created some new systems for managing clients for my team. When my department was reduced due to company layoffs, I actually took that as an opportunity to take some time off and take care of my parents who were in poor health. And I've always really been interested in data analytics. So as I was taking that time off, I taught myself some basic skills, but I quickly realized that I needed and I wanted a more structured program. So I enrolled in the Tableau data analytics program at this university, and I started performing some of this exploratory data analysis using spreadsheets and SQL and Tableau. And I packaged like creating these insights for various businesses. I'm now searching for my next opportunity, and I'm very interested in your company. The work you're doing to make healthcare more available and affordable is a mission that I'm really passionate about because I'm the primary caretaker of my parents, and I really see every day how important this is. So David says, hire him. I want to know what makes this better. What makes this a better story? And you can tell me in the chat. Yes, David, he's on a mission. He gave a better understanding of his role. Thanks, Cameron. That's right. It mixes, yeah. So Elizabeth, that's a really good point. It mixes the personal with the professional, right? I now want to help Jake. I'm like, I want to give him a role. Like, he sounds like a great person, right? I get to know him a little bit, and I get to know his professional story. He's selling himself. Yes, he's like, you could even say he's like maybe boasting a little bit, right? Like, I wouldn't think that, but maybe when he's talking, says, I was the top 10%. He might feel like he's boasting a little bit, but it actually makes him sound accomplished, right? Like a leader. Yes, exactly, Ashley. He's showing more interest totally in the company, Omar. Awesome. So if I could nitpick this and I could make this a little bit better, but this is a solid story, right? And this is a story. This is something that he can repeat and he can tell in a lot of different places. Specifically, so this is everything you said, but he was specific about his past experiences, right? I learned Salesforce. I worked as an SDR. I was 10%, top 10% of reps. He also talks about his accomplishments and he brags a little bit, okay? I performed exploratory data analysis. I was the top rep that year. I created systems, right? These are accomplishments and they feel a little uncomfortable when you say them out loud, but if you're not going to say them, nobody's going to know about them, right? And that's ultimately hurts you at the end of the day. He also mentions that he had been laid off and that there were layoffs, but he doesn't dwell on it. And he kind of frames it in a generative way, right? Oh, I took this as an opportunity to learn and to do something really important for my family. And he's clear about the certificate that he got. He's proud of his education and proud of what he learned, right? I learned SQL and Tableau and spreadsheets. Like he's kind of talking that up. A lot of times people just say like, oh, I took this master's program or, oh, I took this boot camp. And it's like, no, you did a program and I want to know about why that was special, right? And then finally, second to last, he makes a connection between his skills and his interests and the company that he's going after, right? So he says, oh, this is a healthcare company. Why do I care about healthcare? And he created a story and he created a passion around that. And maybe he had to dig deep. I don't know, right? Maybe Jake had to kind of like find that within himself, but he took the time to do that. And you'll notice here that he's telling a confident story about his past, his present, and his future, right? All of those things are here. And this is kind of the template and the structure that I want you to use. And so we'll go into depth a little bit more on this. So recapping a couple things before I move on to my template. The best way to answer this question is to be confident about your past, your present, and your future. You will not always feel confident, okay? But we're going to talk about how to do that in a little bit more. But know that if you're not confident about your story, then nobody else is going to be confident about you, right? So it really starts with you. A good story shows off your skills, your accomplishments, what you care about. It confidently acknowledges career changes, disruptions, time off, but it doesn't overly dwell on them. And it doesn't mention every single thing that you do in your past. So if you remember from Jake's story, he actually worked retail jobs for a little bit, right? He didn't put that in here. And he could have if it actually contributed to him being a data analyst. But if it doesn't, he didn't include it. And that's okay. And I'm going to show you how to do that. And he ended by describing how his interest to the field of data analysis developed, right? And evolved. Even if at the moment, Jake didn't feel like this, he felt like this was all random, right? Oh, somebody mentioned data to him. He looked it up. Even if it feels random, when he told his story, he made it sound intentional. And that's not lying, right? But this is the amazing part of telling your story is that you get to tell your story. Nobody else gets to tell your story. So if you want to say that it happened in this way and this is the way it felt, that's yours to own, right? So he made his story intentional and he dug deep for the ways that it was intentional. And finally, it made this other person, this company, feel like they were special. Jake, want to work there. Because you're a special company. All right, so let's talk a little bit about a framework for how you can tell your story. So I've been hinting at this, but you're going to want to start by talking about your past and your past experiences, your past accomplishments, then move into the present. What are you doing right now? What are you learning? What are you working on? What are you doing? And then you're going to end by describing what you want for yourself in the future and why that particular company. So you're probably going to have like maybe a couple of different versions of your story because sometimes you talk to companies like this that are in healthcare and sometimes you talk to companies in law and finance. So your story, the future part of your story is going to be a little different every time. So let's look at another example and then go through the template. So here's Stefan, and here's his past. So I've been working in the event planning industry for 10 years. I absolutely loved the thrill of organizing 10,000 person events. That was like the thing that I loved the most. But by the end of my tenure, I was managing a team of 30 people across 6 regions. So I was really doing a lot. And then COVID hit, right? And I began to kind of like slow down, and I needed to explore some other passions. So I had always been intrigued by digital marketing, and even did it a little bit when I was doing my event planning, supporting the marketing team for various events. But so I knew about digital marketing, but I really didn't know as much as I could have, right? So I decided to fully transition my career into the digital marketing space, and I enrolled in the Facebook Digital Marketing Certificate Program. In this program, I started creating marketing plans and social media strategies and different pieces of content marketing and social media. And now, I'm really interested in your company because I'm looking for a role where I can combine my digital marketing skills with my past event planning, like my past life, right? And this role is going to allow me to use both of these things together to support small businesses in marketing their events to a larger audience. And so that's really exciting for me, really aligned with my background, and really what I want to do next. So I think that was pretty good acting on my part, I'll say. I think Stefan's got a great story. I think that it's really clear, and I feel like I know him a little bit better, right? So let me take you through this. And remember, you're going to get a copy of this. So you don't need to write everything down. You can take screenshots of this if you want, but you'll get a copy after. But let's say you're sitting down and you need to write your story. You're going to start with the past. Okay. And here's how you're going to do that. So you're going to use this template. Over the past, 1 year, 2 years, 10 years, I've been working I've been working in jobs such as blank, right? In these roles, I've developed skills in event planning, in paralegal work. I accomplished ABC. I got really interested and inspired by this small class I took on Salesforce. I learned blank about myself, right? These are just sentence starters you can use. But basically what you're trying to do is summarize your past experiences and what you learned and got good at, okay? So here's another example here for Julia. After high school, I went right into working for my family business. I scaled the family business from 1 to 5 cities over the past 2 years. I learned how to manage people, manage budgets, and the business was doing well, but I needed to equip myself with the new technical skills that I could use to scale businesses even more efficiently, right? And make data-driven decisions for the company. So a couple of things here I wanna point out. When you're talking about your past, you want to talk about past jobs, what you accomplished, what skills you gained, and you can mention any gaps or time off, right? And I'll talk about how to include that. You'll also want to talk about your passions and your career interests. It's going to be hard sometimes because you might be looking on your past and be like, oh my God, I did so many different things. There's really not a cohesive story. But I work with students all the time and they tell me their story. And then if any of my coachees are on this call, I often tell your story back to you. And if I can find the cohesion and if I can find the themes in your background, then you can too. It's going to take you a minute. You've got to sit down and think, okay, I've done all these different jobs, but actually they're all similar because I was playing a technical role on a team. I was always helping teams to be more technical, right? Whatever it is, you've got to find that theme and that pattern. A couple of things not to include. I don't want to know every single role you held. I don't want a timeline. This is a story. It's not a timeline. It's not from 2015 to 20. No, I can look at your resume for that. I also don't want to know small, tiny jobs that you did in your timeline that didn't help you at all. Like if you bartended at night, if you we're doing babysitting, like these are important things, but if they didn't contribute to where you are now in a meaningful way, then just skip them. Okay. Just don't include them because they're not additive to your story right now. If when you were a bartender, you met somebody that was a data analyst and that person introduced you to the field, then you want to include it, right? But if it was just something to make money, you can leave it out. Also, don't include specifics of why you were laid off or out of work or anything. You can just say, I chose to take some time off. Okay. If you were fired for poor performance, just say, it wasn't the right fit for me. I needed to move on to another position, right? You don't have to go into the specifics of that. So a lot of times I work with people that get stuck when they're talking about their past, right? Like it's just really hard. And so I want to give you some examples of this because this is a really important part. It's the most important part of your story. And so we're going to go through like an activity you can do if you're stuck. So we're going to use Janine. And what Janine is going to do is she's going to write down every job she's ever held since high school, and including education she's done. Okay, so this is an activity. I'm not going to have you do it now, but I literally want you to take a piece of paper and write down every job that you've ever held after high school, including education, any time off. So here's what she would write down. She worked as a bartender. She enrolled in college and she took courses in project management. She didn't finish, but she became a receptionist at a small organization. She got laid off. She started working contract in medical billing, and she wasn't really happy with that. So she started searching for a new job or a new career. And then she kind of stumbled upon project management by looking at she actually saw an ad and she kind of stumbled upon it and went and took this certificate. So this is literally every job and everything that Janine has ever done. And she wrote it down in this, just on a piece of paper. The next thing that she's going to do is underline the experiences that gave her skills related to where she is now. Okay, so basically underline the most impactful experiences that are from your past. Okay, so what does that mean? So she's underlining, like worked as a bartender for her was not helpful. For some people it might be, right? She took courses in project management in college. That is impactful because it actually introduced her to project management. She became a receptionist. She got a lot of work experience there. And then this stuff that she's doing with contract work with medical billing, she didn't love it, but it was actually impactful because it taught her a bunch of skills. So you're underlining things that taught you something, where you grew as an individual and you grew as a professional. Okay. So let's look at what to do next. Then you're going to take the things that you underlined and you're going to start packaging them and start figuring out a way to talk about them in your story. Let me show you. So one of the things she underlined was that she took college courses in project management. Okay. This was her first exposure to project management. And she remembers, she's thinking back on it. She's like, I loved it. Project management. I remember thinking like, this is so orderly. Like I'm an organized person. This is like the perfect thing for me. Right. It just made sense. She also underlined receptionist because as a receptionist, she didn't have a project manager title, but she actually was doing a lot of coordination and communication and teamwork and just good business, workplace skills. She also underlined medical billing, even though she hated it, because she had to build project management skills there too. And she had to do a lot of attention to detail because if you're not billing correctly, there's huge problems there, right? So these are all things that she's going to bring into project management and she's going to use in her career, even though she was never a pure project manager as a title. So she's taking all of this and she's starting to write the past part of her story. So she says, I was first introduced to project management in college, where I took a few courses and I just totally loved it. My first role was as a receptionist at a law firm, where I put my project management skills into more formal practice. I implemented a new scheduling system. I organized all of our events, and I was really kind of interacting with 20, 30 clients a day. I then transitioned into a role in healthcare where I again was using a lot of project management to ensure that all of our insurance claims were billed correctly at a really large top 5 insurance provider. I managed and organized over 100 claims a day in this role over the last couple of years. And while my past experiences have been really diverse, and not necessarily labeled as a project manager, I've really been working in project management for the last several years across healthcare, across, law, like just in a lot of different types of professions. That is her past. That is what Janine should say about her past, right? And that's like this, I made it look easy, but I promise you, if you go through this activity, you can get to this place. So we've just kind of finished talking about past and the past part of your story, but I want to address something right now. There are some people in the audience, everybody here has something in their resume or their work experience that maybe was a gap, right? There's a gap, maybe because you took the gap or you were forced to take a gap. There might also be things like getting laid off, getting fired. Maybe you changed a lot of jobs quickly, right? And you're like, oh, this doesn't really look good. So the point that I'm trying to make is that we all have something in our past that we wish was a little different, okay? But there are, there are things that we need to think about in our past, like that are actually making us who we are today, okay? Like taking off time to raise a family, to raise your family, like that's really, really important. And you learned a lot through that experience, right? COVID, you got laid off. Like, what did you learn from that, right? There's something valuable in all of these experiences. And so it's really on us to think about how we can frame these experiences in the most positive way possible. And I love it that people are putting things in the chat right now. I'm seeing things like a gap in work because of COVID, a gap in work of taking care of family, a gap because you did not have a valid visa to work in the US. Like, please feel free to put as many things on here as you can, because we all have them. And I think that you have to kind of walk the walk. You've got to show you're a confident person despite some of the things that might have happened, because it's all about how you see these experiences, right? So a couple of things that I want you to ask yourself when you're thinking about whether something like this should go into your story or not, okay? Is this something that I feel comfortable sharing with other people? Some people are maybe handling, going through mental health with personal, physical health crises. Some people just don't want to share those things, and that's okay. And if you don't want to share them, then you can find a way to talk about that, right? You can say, I needed to take off a little bit of time for personal reasons. That's okay. Nobody's going to ask about that. And that's all you have to say, right? You also want to ask yourself, is this meaningful? Is this a meaningful part of my story? Did I learn something or experience something that is relevant to my next job? So I have somebody in the chat, Matunde, who just wrote, I have 2 girls to take care of and I had to drive 50 miles every day to work, and that really wasn't working for me. Yes. So I don't you're making a decision here for your family, ultimately for the health and safety of your family, right? And so when you say that you had to leave a job, all you need to say is that job was not workable for my family responsibilities at the time. And so I needed to search for a new job that was going to allow me to spend the time with my 2 girls, right, that I needed to do. And so that's an authentic and genuine thing to say. And I guarantee you the person on the other end of the line is going to understand and knows that they've had something similar in their life. So just think about what did I learn from this? What can I pull out from this, right? A lot of people, when they take time off, they may have done some self-learning, or they may have come to a realization. And that's something that's great to bring into your story. And finally, I want you to think about, if I didn't include this, if I didn't include the 2 years that I didn't work, is somebody going to ask me a big question about that? If you think that it's going to trigger a big question, then proactively put it into your story, okay, in the ways that we've talked about, right? So there's a lot that we can do here. What my main point is I don't want you to shy away from the meaningful things in life that we've had to go through, but I also want you to frame it in a way that makes you feel comfortable. Okay. So if you've got a specific use case that you're like, I don't know how to frame this, put it in the Q&A and I promise you I'll get to it before the end of the session. All right. So back to our framework here. We talked about our past. Now I want to talk about our present and our future, okay? So what happens in the present part of the story? So this is a template we can use for the present. So we can say, I just completed a program. I just enrolled in a program where I'm learning, da, 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 right? Or you can say, I'm working as a blah, blah, blah right now, right? I'm learning these skills on my own. I'm teaching myself this thing. Basically, you're just telling people what you're doing now, okay? If you do not have a job and you're not doing anything right now, I want you to think about what you can say about what you're doing. Okay. If you are enrolling and doing a little like online learning for free online, talk about that, right? If you are focused on supporting your children right now, say that that's what you're doing, right? Don't shy away from that, but be clear about what you're doing right now, because you want to look like you're doing things, right? And you're making moves for yourself. So let's look at this example for I think her name was Julie. I think I named her Janine, maybe. So I recently enrolled in the Tableau Data Analytics Certificate, which taught me analysis tools such as spreadsheets, SQL, Tableau. In this program, I'm conducting exploratory data analyses on various data sets and visualizing insights. On the side, I'm also still working on my family's business to apply what I'm learning in data analysis. So this is not rocket science. You guys can formulate what you're doing as the present part of your story, but just make sure to not say, yeah, I'm just doing this program on the side. What are you doing in that program, right? Talk it up. So a couple things to include: education, specifics, brag a little bit, and any, jobs or freelance that you're doing. I don't want to include too many things that are not relevant to your ultimate career goal. So if you're doing, like I said, if you're doing something on the side that is just like literally to make money and you can't frame it in any way that's generative, then just leave it off, right? But if you're working, part-time retail, great. But what can you say about working part-time retail that's helping you to say the story about where you're going next? I'm working part-time retail right now, and it's actually giving me a ton of like customer experience. And I know that my next role in Salesforce is actually going to really use a lot of those customer skills. So, I'm kind of informally building that on the side as I'm looking for work. Great. All right, so future, the last part of your story, okay? Now it's time to talk about what's next. So I'm looking for a career where I can combine my interests, my passion in blank with my skills in blank. I want to bring the skill set to your company because I'm inspired by your company's mission, by your values, by your vision, by something about your company. Or you can say something like, I'm inspired and passionate about this cause. This company is aligned with this cause and will allow me to use my skills in a way that's aligned with my purpose. So you can take this a couple of different directions, but the thing that this is going to take is research. You're most likely not going to be able to pull something out without looking into what the company does. Okay, so let's just look at an example and then I'll go into specifics. So I'm looking for a career where I can combine my experience in scaling early stage businesses with data analysis. The role at your company is an ideal environment for me to apply my entrepreneurial spirit to solving really complex data challenges in a fast-paced environment, because that's really what my whole background since high school has been about. So what to include here? The connection between your skills and your passion and the company. You do not want to include really vague information about this company and its alignment to your goals. So you don't want to say something like, yeah, like your company is just going to be a great place for me to grow. What does that mean? Right? Why is it a great place for you to grow? Is it a great place for you to grow because you know that they have recently, raised funds and are aggressively scaling their internal operations and you want to be a part of a company that's growing rapidly over the next year? Like, why, right? And as I said, this is going to take research. So you're going to need to Google the company. You're going to need to look them up on LinkedIn, but this is going to only take you a couple of seconds to do when you get faster at it. But you need to make sure your story is personal and personalized. So here's her story all together. I'm not going to read it again, but we just went through each of these 3 parts of her tell me about yourself answer, right? So now that you have your story, and when I say you have your story, I mean that you've literally taken a piece of paper and you've written your story down on it, okay? Because I'm a big believer that the only way you can prepare, the best way to prepare for interviews and conversations is to write down your answers to really common questions. And this is one of them. I don't expect you to hold it in your head. And when you write it down, you can actually get feedback. So if you're a Pathstream student, you can get that feedback on your story from your coach. Right? So that's huge. So a couple of things I want you to know. I need you to practice your story. I need you to write it down, read it out loud, read it to your friends, read it to your family, and practice delivering it, right? You saw me. I was reading from a slide, but I made it my own slide. I made it my own words. And the only way to get there is to practice. I already covered writing it down. We talked about that. I also want you to remember to tailor and customize your story, because you can't just say the same story to everybody, right? We talked a little bit about that as well. And finally, I'm sorry to say these very annoying words, be confident, right? I hate when somebody says that to me, but I can't tell you how many people that I've worked with over the last 10, 12 years in education that they downplay their story, right? Because they do not think that it's impressive or interesting to other people. And that's such a hard thing, because if you are not confident in your story, no one else is going to be confident hearing it, right? So, yeah, so Ashley, yes, like we all have that, okay? And I want you to know that you're not alone in feeling like, oh, who's going to be interested in this story? Like I was literally not doing anything interesting for 10 years. You've got to reframe that. You have to reframe that in your mind, okay? Because I promise you, I can make any story interesting. And you have to be able to find your own story interesting. And the way that it becomes interesting is if you can stand up and tell it with life and with energy, like, and a smile on your face. I promise you that will change the way that you feel about your story. But the other piece is that sometimes you have to speak with confidence, even if you don't feel it inside. Right. And that's why the preparation for this is really important. If you prepare and you write your story down and you dig deep into your past and you pull out your story, you'll be able to speak it with more confidence. I promise you. And remember, if there's something about your past that you're like, that really felt random, it didn't feel like it's a cohesive story. The great thing is that you get to tell your story the way you want to tell it. Nobody else gets to tell you how to tell your story. So if you actually want this order to go A to B instead of B to A, you get to take that like little creative liberty in telling your story how you want to tell it. Okay. So don't let anybody take that away from you, and know that it's your story to own, your story to tweak, right? Your story to change a little bit here, change a little bit there, because you get to look back and say, this is how it went. Right. And I don't mean lying. I don't mean rearranging things too much, but I just mean pulling out different pieces of your story that are really authentic to you. So a little recap here. The framework that you'll see when you get this recording is to use the past, present, and future framework. Okay. That is how I want you to tell your story, and I want you to write it down, and I want you to practice it. I want you to look at your past experiences, and this is the hardest part. So the past part is where you need to spend the most time. And you need to literally write down everything you've done, okay? And then I want you to underline and circle the ones that are impactful to you. And maybe they were impactful because they were horrible. That really can be the case sometimes, right? Because sometimes those horrible experiences cause you to turn somewhere else, right? When you're talking about your present, you want to boast a little bit. You want to say, I'm doing this, I'm getting involved in this. And then when you're talking about the future, you want to talk about and make that company feel special. And be confident, be proud. If you're not proud, then nobody else is going to be.